I'd like to thank all the residents who are in attendance, as well as council and staff. We also have staff from the Ministry of Forest, Lands, Natural Resources, Operations and Rural Development, FLNRORD, otherwise known as FLNRO. So I'm very proud of the progress that the city has made in preparation for and responding to the communication about spring freshet. This council committed to making improvements in this area, and I feel that we've delivered on that promise. So before we jump into freshet, I do want to provide one piece of general information. At the last town hall meeting, one of our residents suggested that town hall meetings become a regular event and that each event could have a different topic or theme. So we thought that was a great suggestion and we're running with it. So for anyone interested in attending, the next virtual town hall meeting will be on June 10th, 2021 at 6 p.m. and the topic will be all things parks, programs, and events. And I'll announce that date again at the end of the evening. So for tonight's meeting, we anticipate that the city and the ministry staff will present for approximately 20 minutes, at which point we'll open the floor up to members of the public for questions. As for the order of presentations tonight, we will first hear a brief introduction, from Sean Smith, the city's Chief Administrative Officer, after which we'll hear from Sarah Simon, who is our FLNRO flood safety engineer. She's responsible for the operation of the Nicola Lake Dam. The final presentation will be from Greg Lois. He's our city's Director of Corporate Services, and he's also our communications officer for our Emergency Operations Center for the city. So once these presentations are made, we'll take any questions from the public regarding freshet. So Sean, the floor is yours right now.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brown. And I know that everybody always questions my ability to do this, but I promise you I heard the tone when you said brief. I will keep it exactly that way. I am also proud of the work that the city has done in regards to freshet and preparations. We have learned so much from 2017 to 2018 and last year with 2020. I know that many residents have heard the stats and you'll see a little bit of it when Sarah talks as well, but there was more water that passed through in 2020 than there was in 2018. I know that's probably hard for residents to believe given we didn't have nearly the overland flooding that we did in 2018, but it was more gradually spread out throughout the freshet season. And I think a lot of that has to go to credit to the ministry for their preparation, their operation of the dam for their great communication, for a lot of the new data that we're analyzing and evaluating that I think is really helping us make great freshet decisions. And so what I really want to do at this meeting is first off, assure the public that we do use data when it comes to freshet analysis. We're not shooting from the hip. We have good ideas, not perfect ideas, but good ideas as to snowpack. We're constantly looking at the weather. We're using the best kind of monitoring data that's available to be able to make good, reasonable decisions. And our plan is to continue to monitor the data as best as we can to make good decisions and to inform the public as early as possible about what all of those decisions are. And so you're going to hear a lot more about what the overall plan and approach to freshet is going to be this year. The other thing that, of course, Council has directed is some more physical changes to help us better prepare for flood. And the most notable change over the course of this last year was the completion of the Boat Street Corner project. And I think everybody is largely aware of what that project is now, but the Boat Street Corner was elevated about 70 centimeters to be able to further kind of protect it from flood events. And so that isn't to say that there may not come a day where we need to put sandbags on that, but it is much better defended, and the type of kind of breach that we saw in 2018 where it was running over Boat Street and across 2nd Avenue is now likely an event that we we hopefully will not need to see again for a very long time. And so we're feeling like from an infrastructure position, we're in a better position there. We're well prepared from an emergency operations center position. Should the need arise, we have staff that are trained and understand what their role are. We understand how we're going to communicate. You'll hear a little bit more about that from Greg, and you'll hear where we're at in terms of kind of snowpacks and what the Nicola Lake conditions are right now. So really look forward to this meeting, and look forward to questions from the public at the end. So with that, I'll pass the time over to Sarah Simon, the flood safety engineer from Flynn.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Thank you, Linda. I'm going to try to keep that 20-minute promise, but I, like Sean, probably tend to run over. So I'm just loading my presentation, and if people could give me a wave when they can see it, that would be great.
Okay, we can see it.
Okay. And I had to, okay, so my name is Sarah Simon. I am the flood safety engineer and operator of the Nicola Lake Dam for the ministry with way too many letters. I always just refer to it as Ministry of Forest, and that has nothing to do with any of my background. So anyway, without further ado, this is a presentation for the public of merit. So I'm going to go over quickly the governance, recent flooding events, the operating plan, as well as the current conditions for the Nicola Lake Dam this year. So I often get questions about how we make decisions, and the ultimate decision-making rests with the Ministry of Forest, Lands, Natural Resources. My managers, as well as me, the dam operator. We use information from the River Forecast Center for their seasonal forecasting. As well, we rely on a local advisory committee when it pertains to environmental. We refer to the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, the Secwépemc Tribal Council, as well as a couple of our BC government employees. And then during the freshet, last year was kind of the first year where we started having really frequent meetings with the Upper Nicola Band, the City of Merritt, the TNRD, as well as ENBC. Here's a quick overview of this just kind of highlights how much water has come through the system in the different years since the ministry took over operation in 1986. So this is the total monthly inflows for each of the different months. So 1 is January, 2 is February. As you can see, most of the water kind of comes in the month of May. And it's pretty obvious that the recent 3 out of 4 years had some pretty difficult flooding challenges. So they kind of stick out: 2017, 2018, and 2020. 1997 is also up there. And what's also interesting with 2020 and 1997 is those ones actually lasted with high water for 2 months long, whereas 17 and 18 went up really fast, and then they came down really quickly. This is another overview just for everyone's recent memory and a recap of the challenges that we've had at the dam. The top bar graph gives us the intensity of the freshet. So 2018 was really the year where it was cold, and then it got very hot, and you can see that's the highest one. So it's basically the average inflow during that freshet period. And so it's just a good indicator for the intensity. The bottom one is the total water that went through the system in that freshet period. So if it was a short freshet, I'm only averaging or looking at that total over just that freshet time. And as Sean alluded to before, 2020 was really the record. We had the most water that came through the dam. And then 1997 is also high, 2017 and 2018. Another thing that's interesting on the bottom graph is it shows us our reservoir storage capacity. So from our minimum, which is what we're at right now, up until our normal full supply level, that's the green. And you can see how it is so difficult for us to manage the system without releasing large amounts of water or going over the full supply level. And then there's also the spillway storage capacity as well. Oh, sorry, clicked too fast. This is the Nicola Lake Dam operating plan. So this dam was built primarily for environmental flows. The idea was they would have a decent elevation throughout the winter period to prevent any freezing up and not allowing water or the channels from freezing and preventing it from not letting water pass downstream. And then in early spring, draw the lake down. And then sometime in May would start to come up to the full supply level, would stay there until kind of the end of the summer, and then would be able to release good flows downstream. This allows for the fish to spawn and for other needs. So what we've learned in the last few years is, before we used to wait a little bit longer to draw the lake down because we were always really concerned about drought. And so it looks like my mouse doesn't allow me to, oh, there it is. It is allowing me to point. So we would, the solid line is actually what our typical or ideal conditions would be. So it used to be to draw it down in early March, down to the minimum, and then go back up. And this would be a year where we're predicting a decent snowpack. In a year where we're predicting drought-like conditions, we wouldn't actually draw the lake down, and we would follow it more closer to this orange line. What we had learned was that unless we were really aggressive in the early winter, we wouldn't actually be able to draw it down to a very meaningful amount. But now, with new addition on drought information, we realize we have much less of a risk of not filling the reservoir, and so we can more confidently draw the lake down as soon as the ice comes off, and then let it stay low until the snow starts to melt. Another thing that we've learned in the last few years is that we don't really have much control over the outflows once the lake gets below 624.4 meters. It essentially becomes channel controlled and lake elevation controlled, which is, if I'll show those graphs in a few slides, but it just basically is a function of the head of the lake. And then a couple other refinements that we've made in the last couple of years. We have the full supply level, but now we understand a little bit more about our rock spillway and the crest of our impermeable berm. So the maximum flood level at the dam, we've now defined it to be 626.5 meters, and that's about a half a meter below, or it is a half a meter below the rock crest spillway. This is a look at our operating plan in terms of outflows. So the bottom line, it should be yellowy orange. That is just our minimum flow requirements, and that's all for fisheries and for irrigator needs. We have a blue line, which is that we try not to release more than 10 cubic meters a second during the time when the fish have spawned, just so that we don't have a risk of any scour. And then what we learned in the last couple of years, just as a result of better data, more monitoring, and unfortunately challenging flows, is 30 cubic meters a second is essentially bank full through Merritt. We realized this could start to have groundwater implications. So that's a number that we think about quite a lot. And then the other one, the new one that we have, is 50 cubic meters a second through Merritt is basically the maximum flow that can pass through without having any significant impacts to infrastructure. So 50 was it's a little bit less than the maximums that were released last year, for perspective. So now I'm just going to move on to the snowpack information. We get a lot of our snowpack information and forecasting from the River Forecast Center. This is a map showing the snow stations that are close to the catchment. You'll see Merritt right here, and then the catchment is pretty much just the high points. These green diamonds are they're stations that they go to once a month and they measure the snow depth, while the snowflakes are stations that actually have continuous snow melt and snow accumulation data in them. And I'll show you quickly in the next slide what that looks like. But basically, the snow basin indice for Nicola is 108% of normal. It has decreased since March 1st, when it was up at 119% of normal. And I've heard from Environment Canada and other meteorologists that we had one of the driest Marches on record. So that brought our snowpack down. And these snow basin indices, or how they predict the snow basin indice, is these stations you see around here. They're kind of used as and then based on some extrapolation and ones that they find to be more indicative of the catchment, have different weightings, and that's how they come up with the percent of normal. And most of it is based on mid-elevation snow. Actually, most of the River Forecast Center's data is based on mid and high elevation snow, whereas the nickel actually has quite a lot of lower elevation snow.
So Sarah, how can you go back to that previous slide? How far does our, how far does it, how far do you have to go to see that it affects the nickel or the Nicola Lake, I guess is what I'm.
If it's within the catchment, yeah, in a few slides, I couldn't put it on this because it was two separate pieces of data, but so the catchment, basically everything that drains in here, it kind of comes up just shy of this top diamond, and then it follows this band here, and then down follows this other one. So it's the green except for this part. So everything is really much on the border, and a lot of that is because they're high elevation points.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. We do also, I didn't put this on this slide, but I have been now watching, there's a bunch of climate stations in the area. So there's fire weather stations as well as the road weather ones. And so I've started looking at that data as well. And I found that to have some interesting information in it too. And a lot of variability is the main conclusion that I'm finding. So this is the information you can get if you go to the River Forecast Center's website and you see that map. You can click on when you click on either one of those. This is from the snowflake ones, the ones that have the continuous plots. And what it is here, this is the range of min and max is in gray. The historical lower and upper quartiles are in pink, and then the median is in gray. Last year's data is in 2020. They always just show last year's data. And then the dark blue line is this year. And so, yeah, as you can see in March, we had quite a lot of snow coming in, and then it was really dry. We actually lost a little bit of snow, and then it went back up. But yeah, and then usually around this week is when the snowpack ripens. That's a technical term for the snow starts to melt. So I think we are expecting a lot of that to happen this weekend. But yeah, we're just right kind of at the median, and this station goes back to 1992, so it actually does have a decent period of record on it. It also they have these 7-day datas and that you can click on, and then it brings up this bottom graphic, and it gives you your air temperatures. We start to see a lot more snow melt once the daytime snow starts to get, or sorry, the nighttime temperature starts to get above 0. So this is yesterday's data, and I'm expecting that the system will probably start to respond shortly. And then up here is just the snow water equivalent, which again is kind of an indication of snowpack. Another thing I look at when I'm trying to assess snow conditions is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in the United States. I'm not sure exactly how the technology works, but they basically get a aerial imagery of the snowpack. And I put kind of the years that were in that are close in mind and challenging up so that we can kind of compare the differences in the snowpack. As you can, and this is all April 15th. I didn't actually look at the day of maximum snow or right before things melted, but in all those years, it was pretty close. So 2017 was a rain on snow event that really drove that. And sorry, before I get too into it. So Linda, you were asking where the catchment is, and it's in green, but it is on these ones, but it got I couldn't get the order of the imagery to reverse. But if you look at these top little mountain peaks, you can kind of get an idea of where the catchment is. But yeah, so in 2017, it was a rain on snow event that drove the freshet. In 2018, there actually wasn't, or very little precipitation that I recall. It was very cool, and then it got very hot in the course of a couple of weeks. And then in 2020, there was actually quite a lot less snow. And again, they measure the snow packet, like Brenda Mines is up in this area up here. But the initial actual snow pulse was still a decent amount, but what really drove 2020 was the continuous rain that happened afterwards. So 2021, we're sitting somewhat similar to 2020, and fortunately, the current forecast is just calling for warm weather, and I don't see any rain in it. So yeah. So current conditions at the dam. So the dam, in light of the elevated snowpack or average snowpack of 110% of normal, the dam will be operated to mitigate flooding as best as possible. The lake is now at its minimum historic elevation. That was due to kind of data we collected over the last few years that gave us confidence that we could really freeboard those gates in early spring. So they've been freeboarded for several weeks now. The outflows are currently controlled by the lake. We're releasing 3.5 cubic meters a second, which is a nice healthy flow. And we won't be able to release much more water until the lake rises to at least about 624.4, and it's about half a meter. The inflows are beginning to increase. Last month, the inflows were below 2 cubic meters a second, and we're currently at 2.5. For perspective, peak inflow in 2018 was 110. So, you know, these are very small inflows, so we haven't really seen much snowmelt come out yet. And these trends are really similar to all of the nearby creeks. I actually had kind of thought some of them would start to show a bit more of the recent snowmelt over the last couple of days, but they still aren't really responding yet. So
Sarah, we have a question from somebody asking about what are freeboarding gates?
Sorry, that just means that the gates are open and the water's actually, you could actually swim underneath the gates. When I close, I'll put it back to the first picture, and it's a picture of the dam from this week, and you can see that you can look underneath the dam. So the dam's not controlling the flows at all. It's all just from the channel and the lake level. Yeah, expecting flows to increase next week. And okay, these are just two graphics just to those points previously. So the top one is the Nicola Lake outflows. Black line is 2021. And again, these are just the different quartiles. So the median is this nice gray line, and the further we, the darker purple is higher flows, and the reds are really low flows. In around March 1st, that's when I opened up the gates and freeboarded, and then the lake, the outflows dropped as the lake level dropped, which you can see in the lower plot. And I put 2020's level on as a reference. 2020 is also on the top as a reference in this like green one. And then the 2028 is, 2018 is also on the top one, but I didn't put it on the bottom. It just kind of got to that bottom red. So the outlook. I think this weekend will provide us with a much better estimate for what to expect in the next couple of weeks. The current forecast is about 5 degrees above normal and no precipitation. So I mean, I think it's this will be the best indication to understand how much snow is currently up in the hills. But I think we're quite well prepared, and we'll be able to provide a better, and we'll have a better understanding on Monday or Tuesday after this warm weather passes. Okay, with that, I'll pass it back over to the City of Merritt.
And I'm going to move right into asking Greg to give his final presentation. There'll be a few questions, I think, on your presentation, but we'll answer them all at the end. Greg?
Thank you, Your Worship. If I can make this thing do what it's meant to. Okay. Why am I... This is the first time I've ever struggled with tech in this kind of meeting. Where's your shared window? It's asking me. This is just brilliant. So...
We can see Greg.
Yeah, we can see it.
You can see me. I have a PowerPoint on another screen that I am trying to make this computer
That screen,
show.
a minute ago, that screen was showing.
Is that there now, Your Worship?
Yes, it's here now.
Wonderful. I do apologize for that. So, communications. My name's Greg Lowis. I'm the Director of Corporate Services here at the City of Merritt, and I'm also the Information Officer with our Emergency Operations Center. In our ideal world, there will be no emergencies, and we really hope that's going to be the case this year. But if there are any issues, if we need to activate anything, then we will do our best to keep you well informed as to what's going on. So when I was putting this together this afternoon, there were 3 key commitments that I really wanted to get across to all the residents of Merritt. And that is that our communications throughout any flooding event will be clear, they'll be concise, and they'll be consistent. Clear, we'll be avoiding jargon wherever possible. I have learned a great deal today just talking with Sarah about some technical terms. If you want the water engineer in my family, you do not want me, you want my sister. We often do not talk each other's same language. I put together statutory stuff and bylaws. So we will always try to explain things as clearly as we can and take them out of some of the technical terms. We'll be looking to explain the consequences of actions to residents so that people know what's going on. An example that came up this afternoon, we'll try to avoid just saying the flow will increase by, say, 4 cubic meters a second. We'll be explaining that for every cubic meter of flow that increases, the river goes up by an inch. So if there's a 4-inch increase anticipated and the water is currently 3 inches below your property line.
Sorry, Greg. We have some that are not on mute. Can you please put your microphone on mute? Thank you.
So yeah, the hope is that we will explain things clearly, what the consequences for residents will be, so that everyone understands what's going on. We will aim to be concise. We won't be putting out communications just for the sake of it. We won't be looking to overload people. It's entirely possible that we could go days at a time without needing to do any updates, and that'll be okay. I remember last year watching Sean's videos explaining in minute detail some of the snowpack levels up at Brenda Mines and how that was impacting flows down into Douglas Lake and then onto Merritt. And to be completely honest, cool as that was for me from a data nerd perspective, if I don't have to do those every day, I will be a very happy person, and I think the residents will be as well. Obviously, we will want to keep you well informed, but sometimes there genuinely will be no news. If there are straightforward explanations, we anticipate putting that out in text form. If we need to explain things in a more complicated manner, then we might do things like videos or the screen captures, and we'll try to make sure that everything is, again, still very clear. And also consistency. Whatever happens, even if, as I said, we won't be putting things out every day if there isn't any news, but we will keep you informed. We're liaising closely with Sarah, obviously, and her colleagues at Flynn Road, and say if there's a gate change, you will know about it. If the river level is going to be changing, you will know about it. So how are we planning on doing this? Obviously, we want to work closely with the traditional media that exists in town, with Q101, the Merritt Herald, but also we'll be trying to put things out as fast as we can. And that means we'll be using a lot of our social media channels. So I've got some screenshots here. Hopefully they'll help people who don't currently follow us on these ways. I know if you're in this meeting, obviously, then you have at least some technological abilities. This is a screen grab of the city's Facebook page. That's facebook.com/City of Merritt. I've put up some big red boxes there. Obviously, you can message us there. You can like our page, but also if you look at these 3 dots there, then you can click on that and open up a menu which allows you to follow the city. That means that things we put out get pushed out into your feed, so that increases the chance that you'll actually get to see the stuff we put up there. Similarly, this is the screen grab of our Twitter feed. There is a follow button on there, which again, if you have a Twitter account, then you can follow us. We'll be trying to keep things on there so you can always see the most up-to-date information. Our website at merritt.ca, we have a news and announcements section right on the front page. If there's news that is being put out, we'll have it on there. And then some of the videos, as I explained before, we might need to do those, particularly if there's more complicated information that needs to get out. This is, if you search for City of Merritt on YouTube, there is again a big red subscribe button, so any new videos we put out will get pushed into your feed. As you can see, the existing videos that we've put out so far this year, they're all up there. There's a horrific face and smiling in the snow. So those are the ways that we'll be trying to keep you updated as fast as possible when we need to put information out. And as I said, we'll be doing our best to keep you informed as fast as possible about things that will affect you and to make it clear what those effects will be. But also, we won't be going out of our way to overwhelm you or to put out information just so that you can hear our voices. So that's all there was from me.
Thank you, Greg. Now we are open for questions, and it looks like, I don't know what's in the chat, but there looks like there could be. I'm going to have somebody who knows what they're doing with the chat to actually. Greg, can you look at the questions on?
Your Worship, I think the first comment at this point, Councillor Fair has his virtual hand raised, and I can say I'm also really pleased that that's working for him now because there were some tech problems with the last town hall.
Okay, Councillor Fair.
Thank you. And yeah, I was able to get some coaching on the putting my hand up thing before the meeting started. So
I think I need coaching on looking for them.
Yeah, my question was regarding during Sarah's presentation, the understanding we have of the which I think is a change in our understanding of the spillway, and I'm wondering if that will have any indication or any results that we need to be aware of, like, and do we know what that looks like?
Sarah, you're on there.
There. Okay, good. Yeah, and I forgot to put that one slide up again. So this is that freeboard question. So you can see that you could actually swim underneath the dam, and it's very laminar, sorry, tech term. It just means it's not very fast moving, very slow water. Yeah, it is new information in that that spillway was never designed to actually pass water over top of it, and the rock is not large enough to withstand very high flows. So we're comfortable having the lake come up to a certain level, but the system was never designed for it to go that much higher. There was a high water event in 2002 or 3 that led to increasing the height of that spillway. And then actually I shouldn't even call it a spillway because unless we were to place a lot larger rock and change the way everything is operated, water is not to pass over top of that. So it was more of a clarification and probably a external communication out.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's just, from a layman's perspective, my perspective, I was just wondering if that is like a reduction in the amount of capacity we can withhold.
No, it's not, because at that type of flow, it puts a lot of stress in and sorry, I'm just I lost your face, and I like to see people when I talk to them, but my tech, how do I make it? Yeah. At that flow, the other thing that we learned is that we didn't know about as many impacts around the lake back in 2017, and also in 2017 and 2018. The rate that the water was coming in was so high that there also wasn't a lot that we could have done to really bring the reservoir down without increasing the outflows a lot more aggressively earlier on. That is one of the changes, and that is to release water higher amounts earlier. Instead of waiting until we don't have much of a choice. So I think just doing that operation thing of why people might question, hey, why is it so high now? We haven't done it, like the lake's not fully full, but it has to do with how that water is coming in and how much more is to come. So we want to be releasing more water earlier when it's warranted, based on what we see for snowpack and what we see for how that inflow is coming into the reservoir. Looking back at the numbers, if we would have had a glass ball and could have predicted all of those rainstorms last year, we would have wanted to bring those flows up higher, and we actually probably wouldn't have. We would have actually had a lower flow the whole period. We still would have had a very long freshet and a very long high flow, but we wouldn't have had to deal with those like that week of higher flow.
Okay, thank you.
So, Your Worship, you were asking about the chat. There's a comment from Meg Mackay, who is wondering where Sarah is physically situated and whether or not she's here in the valley to see the lake and rivers.
I work out of the my home in the city of Kamloops. Right now, I go out to the dam on about a weekly basis. And then during different periods of the year, it's less. I also have the liberty to call on employees in the city of Merritt that have gone out and will either do gate changes, especially like in the last couple of years when there was gate changes multiple times a day. I can call them and they can go out, and they also help with doing any of the dam safety inspections that are required as per the dam safety regulation.
Thank you. And Sean, you had a question?
I just wanted to echo that. I really want residents to know that I think that the relationship between the city and Sarah, but all Flint Row staff, is really strong, and that during freshet, if there's any kind of cause for concern, we were often talking more than once a day, discussing what the conditions on the ground were, what the impacts were on residents, what the flows that we could potentially handle more, whether we would need to accept those flows or not. And so I found the process to be very collaborative, and also balancing the upstream effects as well, because this is where the challenge came in, and this is more to Councillor Fair's question. But even at the 6 to 6.5, which is the level that we're not wanting to go above for any flood reasons, last year we were kind of hovering right around that level, and there were still evacuations in the Upper Nicollet area at that level. And so it's really tough trying to balance the needs of all the parties and minimize impacts for everyone. But I think that we've developed a plan because of better understanding what can safely pass through Merritt. By getting more through earlier, we can minimize those upstream effects while still limiting the risk of significant flood through Merritt. So it's not a guarantee. It's going to depend on what nature throws at us. But to give you an idea, when I started here, and the idea in 2018 was that it was kind of risky to put Merritt up to 30 cubic meters a second. And now, in part because of the data, but some of the physical changes that have been made, so we know that 30 cubic meters per second, the banks are full, but there's no overland flooding risk with that. There's even up to 50 is something that is handleable. Again, last year was not comfortable for everyone, especially those closest to the river. It was higher than any of us would like it to be, but that was about 7 cubic meters per second higher than that 50, about 57 when you're combining the dam and Mill Creek. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to keep things below that 50 level, but even lower than that if the conditions warrant it. So yeah, we have lots of conversations with Sarah to make sure that we're making decisions based on actual conditions that we're seeing.
Thank you. Any other questions? Comments? So am I hearing both of you, all three of you, say at this point in time, we are not anticipating any kind of flooding? And what conditions would there have to be over the next little while for us to even worry about it at this point?
You're always, that's dangerous territory, Mayor Brown. You're not going to hear any one of us say that, but what you will see is that this is a pretty typical snowpack year for us. We're fairly close to the average. When Sarah was showing the Brenda Mine snowpack, we were running fairly close to the median, which I'm going to be honest, in terms of where you want to be, you don't want to be 50% snowpack where we're looking at dangerous drought situations. You don't want to be 150% snowpack. So being right around 100 is a pretty good starting place. And that 108 number that you saw there was based on April 1st. And so with these 2 weeks as they've progressed, I think that we probably are fairly close to that 100% number. But the caveat to that is in 2020, we were a pretty average year as well. And we saw a lot of water in the month of May. It rained and it just did not stop raining. So the conditions that could put us over the edge is exactly that. If we see high amounts of precipitation, especially if that's kind of rain on snow, which hopefully we won't see, the weather looks fairly good for at least this week's forecast, but we have to be mindful of conditions. So you're not going to hear any of us say that there's no chance of any potential flooding. We really are going to monitor it and be vigilant in that regard. But as it stands right now, we're looking as good as we can at this point, not being able to look more than about 7 or 10 days out in the future. It's looking promising.
Yeah, and the other thing to add to that too is that there's a lag time too, right? Like right now, the lake isn't even full that I could even flood. Like we could even flood Merritt at this stage because all we can release is 3 cubic meters a second, which is what you're seeing right now. So yeah, it would have to be. You would see it coming. We would see all of the snow would have to melt really, really quickly, and there would have to be a good amount of snow and then possibly a rainstorm or something. But this weekend, I think will be really telling on how much snow there is, because I think a good portion of it will melt this weekend.
And I think even if we have rainfalls here, we still don't know what the high mountains are doing. And
there are a couple of tools that I've shown Sean last year, but if you go to the Environment Canada website, there's a radar. You can click on that and you can actually watch the rainstorms pass through the systems. And it shows you where the areas that are where it's raining more heavily. I watched that very closely during the freshet period, and then there's also I have access to quite a few gauges just through the fire weather stations and the road weather station, so I've been looking at those as well. One thing I noted in 2020 was that the variability in the rain was pretty significant. Up at Glimpse Lake, there was I think 3 times the normal rainfall for the month of May. But then over at the Pennask, it was just like 1 or 1.5 times the amount. So where it hits and how hard it hits also is a factor that we have to consider. But yeah, like to echo Sean's, I'm not going to say we're not going to have any issues this year, but as it stands, I'm not uncomfortable going into the weekend, and we will know more after the weekend, and we'll be able to inform everyone then.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Christopherson, did you have a question or a comment?
I was just wondering, I believe now that the channel has been dug to help out Stump Lake, and that's entering Nicola Lake. Is that going to have any impact on us?
The TNRD and the province paid for a water balance study just to look at if the lake were to go up to what level, what would the discharges be? And I looked at those numbers, and one of the things that really, because we don't know what the discharge, we've never seen it discharge, and it's not monitored in a real-time sense. But what I got out of that report was the lake has to come up pretty significantly before we start to have really significant flows. And in order for those large flows to make a meaningful difference on the Nicola Lake, we're looking at, say, a 200-year return period. They had those numbers published. That would mean over 200 cubic meters a second coming into the Nicola Lake Dam, which is double what we had in 2018. And at that, only 20 would be coming from Stump Lake. So it's about a 10%. So it wouldn't, I don't see it as a huge problem. But we'll be watching it this year, and we'll learn from that, and that will be included in how we make our decisions.
Good. Well, thank you. That's quite reassuring.
Yeah, I was comforted when I read that too.
And I know that we as a city have said to TNRD that any flows that are expected to come out of Stump Lake, we will take flows any part of the year, but not during freshet. So I don't think they're anticipating moving large volume of water during freshet anyways,
I don't.
even if they could.
Yeah, and from my understanding, there aren't any current plans to be constructing a structure to do anything. So it's just all just natural flows at this stage.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Greg.
Sorry, Your Worship, I was just going to move on to the next chat message.
Good.
So this is from Karen Chabot, who is so worried about the river by Springbank Avenue and the caving of the bank. How does the dam help this?
Sarah, are you familiar with the Springbank area?
I think
Up
we
by Extra Foods?
Claybank.
Not Claybanks, it's up by Extra Foods way.
No, I'm not very familiar with it.
Okay.
I can comment. So this one is one that I'd sent off some information about, but just to give a bit of an answer, the short of it is I don't think the dam really does anything to help any potential erosionary effects along the Nicola. I think that it's a natural process, admittedly a scary natural process. And so what I will commit to do is I think there's a number of homeowners in the area that are concerned about this. I'm happy to arrange a meeting and we can kind of talk a little bit more privately about what the concerns are and what the potential options are. And I don't mind kind of talking and being a little bit of an intermediary with the province so that homeowners can understand what their kind of rights in relation to the river are and how they may be able to make applications in order to kind of protect against potential effects there. So I will commit to reaching out in the next week or so to those residents.
Thank you. And we will let the residents know how.
We'll have direct contact with the ones that are immediately in the area. And Karen, if I can count on reaching out to you, and if you think there's others in the neighborhood that are going to want to be involved, I'm happy to open it up to whatever degree is necessary.
Okay. And if they have any questions, they can get in touch with you over the next couple of days.
Absolutely.
Or get in touch with me as well. Okay, anything else?
I actually did want to just add one point. This is slightly more technical, but I think it's really important for residents to understand, of course, is that we get the bulk of our flow through the Nicola River in Merritt is from the Nicola Lake, but we also have Clapperton Creek, which Sarah did talk about as well. And so I want residents to know that we're also monitoring flows, and we're really grateful for the province that has installed kind of a flow station on Clapperton Creek now. So we have a real-time knowledge as to what is passing through Clapperton Creek. So with that, when we're talking about 50 cubic meters flowing through Merritt, that's the combined flow of Clapperton Creek and the Nicola Lake Dam. So we're always very mindful that if Clapperton Creek is raging and it's giving us a higher proportion of flows, 10, 15 cubic meters a second, then we're kind of expressing that we would like to receive less from the Nicola Lake Dam if that's possible, to make sure that we stay in kind of that acceptable flow level through Merritt. And the converse of that is when Clapperton Creek is low and only giving us 2 or 3 cubic meters per second, most of the flow is coming from the dam. So I do want residents to know that we're also monitoring that, and it's not something that is going to catch us unaware.
And there's also Mill Creek. Can you
Mill
just?
Creek is Clapperton Creek.
Oh, yeah. Is it the same creek?
All part of the clarification.
Okay. So seeing no other questions, and I'd just like to say thank you for attending. And if you happen to go to bed tonight and wake up with a question on your mind, please don't call us in the middle of the night, but we are more than happy to hear your questions first thing in the morning, and we'd be happy to answer them. So either Sean, Greg, or myself I would probably pass the information on to Sean and Greg to begin with. So this is so technical that it's not my area. But please feel free to give us a call if you do have any questions that you need answered. Just want to say have a great evening. It's a beautiful evening out there, and I'm glad we didn't take up too much of your time. And have a great day and stay safe. Great evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, everyone.
It was good. It was very good.
Good information.
Good
Thank you.
information. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.